Hello, this is Chapter 6 in John Masefield's The Box of Delights. Chapter 6. Please, Kay said to the bishop, can I talk to the Punch and Judy man? I'm afraid not, the bishop said. He is asked specially that the children should not talk to him either before or after the performance. He is an old man and suffering rather with his throat. But it is Hawkins, isn't it? Kay asked. The old man who was at Seeking's last night. Oh, yes, the bishop said. It's Cole Hawkins. Presently they were all taken to the room in which the performance was to be given. Kay thought, now I'll be able to speak to him. But in this he was disappointed. It was a long room, once the guest room of the pilgrims, with a stage at the end almost covered with a curtain, and with the Punch and Judy Theatre standing on it. The performance took place on the other side of the curtain, and there was no chance whatever for him to speak to old Cole. It seemed to be exactly the theatre that Cole had used, and the Toby dog was an Irish terrier. But at the end of the play, when Kay called, Barney, Barney, the dog did not answer to his name. Kay wondered several times during the performance whether the performer's voice was quite that of Cole. When the curtain fell, Kay's hopes of speaking to the old man were at an end. For the bishop at once said, And now, everybody, I want you all to move to the next room behind you to dance round our Christmas tree and receive your gifts. In the midst of the next room was the biggest and most glorious Christmas tree that had ever been seen in Tatchester. It stood in an enormous half-barrel full of what looked like real snow, stuck about with holly and mistletoe. At the top of this great green fir tree was a globe of green light set about with fiery white rays for the Christmas star. The boughs were laden with the most exquisite gifts: whistles, drums, tops of different kinds, whips, trumpets, swords, pop guns, pistols that fired caps, and others which fired corks, and many dolls and teddy bears for the little ones. For the older boys there were railways with signals and switches, and passenger trains and goods trains, some of which went by steam and others by clockwork. There were aeroplanes which you could wind up so that they would fly around the room. There were farmyards with cocks and hens which really pecked, and cows which waggled their heads. There were zoos with all sorts of animals, and aquariums with all sorts of fish. Then there were mechanical toys, men boxing or wrestling, and boxes of soldiers with cavalry and cannons, bricks and Meccano, and all sorts of adventure books and fairy books. For the girls there were needle boxes with silver thimbles and cases of needles, necklaces, bangles and brooches. There were boxes of chocolates, candied fruit, and great glass bottles of barley sugar, raspberry drops, peppermint drops, and acid drops. Then for both girls and boys there were toy boats, some with sails and some with clockwork engines. Hanging from the boughs here and there were white and scarlet stockings, all bulging with chocolate creams done up with silver paper. All round this marvellous tree were wonderful crackers 18 inches long. The bishop made all the children stand in a double rank round the tree, each with one end of a cracker in each hand. The musicians struck up a tune, and they danced in the double rank 3 times round the Christmas tree. Then the bishop gave the word, and they pulled the crackers, which went off with a bang together like cannons. And then suddenly Kay remembered that he had not thought about little Maria since he left the police inspector. Good heavens, he thought, Maria isn't here. What shall I do? He went up to the bishop's sister and asked her if Maria had been there. No, she said, no, and the bishop just said to me just now, I'm sorry not to see little Maria here. She may think I bear malice for the smashing up of my car that time, but indeed that it isn't so. I should have loved to have her here. Do you mind if I telephone? Kay said. He went down and telephoned to Ellen. No, Ellen said. Miss Maria hasn't come back. By the way, Kay called, we shall be a little late in getting away from here. Will you ask the Rupert Arms to send a car to meet the 8-7? Ellen said she would. Presently the evening came to an end and all the happy children were ready to go away. Just as they were crowding into the hall, going off in instalments as the cars came for them, the butler came to the bishop with a look of great gravity on his face. Kay was standing close behind the bishop and heard him say, "What is it, Rogers?" And the butler replied, "I'm sorry to tell your grace that during the performance burglars have been in every room of the palace. They have turned the place just topsy-turvy, your grace." "Indeed," the bishop said. "Warn the police, Rogers. I will be with you in a moment, as soon as my young friends have gone." "If you please, your grace," Kay said, "do you think I might say goodbye to the Punch and Judy man?" "I'm afraid he's gone," the bishop said. "Somebody in an old car came for him as soon as the performance was over." Kay thanked the bishop for their glorious treat, and they were soon in the car, driving home in the slush. "Well, I do hope," said Kay, "that Maria hasn't been in the burglary with the gang. It would be just like her to do a thing like that." "Maria wouldn't have had a hand in it," Susan said, "except to collar all the swag and bring it back to its owners." When they reached home there was no news of little Maria, but in some strange way the news of the burglary had reached Ellen. She greeted the children with, "I do hope the burglars didn't frighten you." "No, they didn't," Kay said. "Has Miss Maria turned up?" "No, not yet, Master Kay," Ellen said. "Is my guardian back?" he asked. "No, Master Kay," Ellen said. "The Rupert's Arms man met there 8-7, but she didn't come by that train, and there's no other train from London tonight." "Did any message come from her?" "No," Ellen said. "I telephoned through to the number you gave. She'd started off to catch that train." "Well," Kay said, "I suppose all the trains are upset, partly with Christmas and partly with the snow. She may have gone a certain distance and then had to come on by car." "It may have been something like that," Ellen said. "Well, I don't know," Kay said. "Do you think I had better speak to the Inspector of Police?" Then he remembered the inspector's maxim. "Ellen," he said, "can you make possets?" "Yes, Master Kay," she said, "I can." "Well, I wish you'd make me a big one," he said, "because I'm feeling very miserable." He went up to bed and found Peter already tucked in, reading a murder story. Kay got into bed and presently Ellen brought him a posset in a mug. He drank it down, thinking that the inspector certainly knew a good thing. The comfort seemed to tingle through him, putting an end to his miseries. When Kay woke up, the fire was almost out, but the moonlight shone in through the open curtains, and outside on the hard asphalt of the walks round the house came the clank of weapons and the stamp of feet marching in time. A trumpet blew and a stern voice cried, "The Wolf Guard setting out for Duke's Heath! Guard against the wolves!" Kay looked out of the window, and there he saw in the moonlight a pack of armed men with bronze scale armour. Armour shields on their left arms, and short swords by their sides, and 2 short spears each. "Are you coming, Kay?" the captain said. Duke's Heath was a couple of miles away, but it seemed to Kay much too good a chance to miss. "Yes, of course I'm coming," he said. He took his precious box, which had been under his pillow, and in a minute he was out of the house. Kay thought that the officer beside whom he was marching was very good-looking and agreeable. He was young, pale, with quick eyes and black hair, and some of his dash was in his men too. They marched like one man, with snap and swagger. "Will you please tell me who you are?" Kay asked. "We," the young officer said, "we're the smartest squad in the finest cohort in the Star Wing of the crack legion of the whole Imperial Roman army. Search it where you will, you'll not find anything anywhere to touch or come near the blue and white stripers of the Tachester Toms." "I suppose not," Kay said. "And are you going to camp at Duke's Moor?" No, the man said. "We're the Wolf Guard passing that way with the mails. We go on to the frontier." "Are the wolves very bad?" Kay asked. So, the man said. "It's best to keep your eyes skimmed. Duke's Moor is none too good a place. There are some of the old lot there who used to hold Chester Hills." "There's a Roman camp at Chester Hills," Kay said. "There had need to be," the officer said. "Were you ever fighting there?" "You'd call it so," he said. "A bad place and bad people. Men disappeared century after century and were never seen again. You say it's limestone country, all honeycombed with caves, and these wolves, as we call them, were all underground. It cost us a lot of men to get them out of it." They marched so swiftly that very soon they were out of the town and in the open fields, with Duke's Moor already black to their right front. "You're looking for a friend, and if I were you, I'd wait here for him. Don't cross the brook. Some of the wolves may be out on the other side, and they're none too good." "You mean men wolves?" Kay said. "See now," the officer said. "That flat bit near the brook? Well, on that flat bit one of our posts saw a calf come out in the moonlight to feed. Just one of these wild white calves that you see. Nothing odd in that. The calf fed and scratched and stank like any other. But the posts noticed that it was always drawing nearer. At last one of the men didn't like the look of it, so he flung a stone and called, 'Get out of it!' And at once the calf tossed off its skin and charged the post, hurt one man and got away with 2 spears. It was 2 of these young wolves under a cowskin. That was only 3 years ago. Just here. They're none too good, the wolves." The squad's music, a strange kind of horn and drum, broke out into a march, and the squad stepped out into it with a stamp and jingle. Soon even the noise and the march was gone. Kay was alone near the swollen brook and the dripping trees of the dingle. The night was now black as a pocket, and there in the blackness of all horror was a white calf moving towards him, just as the Roman had described. Then the moon shone out again, and he saw it was a white lady who held her hand in a peculiar way, so that he could see a large ring and a glittering St. Andrew's cross on it. She was the lady who had been outside Bob's shop, waiting for the message. "Come, Kay," she said. "You must not stay here, for the wolves are running. Listen." The midnight was still enough save for the babble of the brook and the occasional running patter of drops from the ash trees. Now above these noises, from out to the north by the straw yards, came the cry of wolves in packs. "All mad," Kay thought, "like the bark of foxes, but much more awful." "Come with me," she said, giving him a hand. As he took it, he felt himself lifted from the grass and glided beside her up the stream to a hollow oak of great age, whose mighty shell was still alive. "There are the wolves," she said. "Look!" There in the moonlight, racing over the grass to them, were the wolves in pack, with their ruffs up and their eyes glaring. The oak tree opened behind Kay, and the woman stepped within, drawing Kay with her. Instantly they were within the quiet of the tree, in a room panelled with living oak wood, and hung with tapestries of oak leaves in which birds were alive. Kay marvelled, for the birds came out of the tapestries and perched upon his hands. "They want some strawberries." "They want some strawberries," the woman said. "Won't you give them some?" Out of a little door in one of the walls, a red squirrel came cocking with its very bright eyes. He carried in his forepaws a cabbage leaf, heaped with strawberries. He hopped down to the table and offered the leaf to Kay, who took the berries and gave them to the birds. It was charming to have the little birds' claws upon the fingers. "Now Kay would like some supper," the woman said. "For indeed, Kay, things are not going too well when the wolves have the best of us underground and are still running." Indeed they were running, sweeping past the tree with every kind of shriek and madness. "They have taken Cole," she said. "They have taken Maria, and they will take others. But don't lose courage, Kay. Even if the wolves are running, you will beat the wolves, won't you, Kay?" Kay said that said he would, and at once there he was back in his bed at Seekings, in daylight, with Peter saying, "It's about time you woke. You have been snoring like a stuck pig. Have you had a nightmare?" When he came down to breakfast, there was no letter from his guardian, but there was a newspaper, and the children pounced upon this for news of the burglary at the palace. "Regrettable incident at Tatchester Palace. We are informed that a serious and very successful burglary was carried out at Tatchester Palace last evening. According to the bishop's laudable custom before Christmas, the palace was the scene last night of a large children's Christmas party with a Christmas tree and other festivities. Whilst there were in progress, the burglars, who it is thought were assisted by someone secreted in the palace, went through the guest rooms and escaped with considerable booty. It is understood that dramatic developments may be expected shortly." "But that's what they always say," Peter said. Kay was very much worried about Maria still being absent, although Maria's brothers and sisters said that she would be all right. "She always falls on her feet," they said. "Don't you worry about Maria." But Kay did worry. As soon as breakfast was over, he went across to the Inspector of Police. "So, you haven't seen Miss Maria," the inspector said. "That doesn't look so well. But you leave the matter in my hands, Master Kay, and I'll make what inquiries are called for. And your guardian, I hear, hasn't come back." "No," Kay said. "That's another point. She ought to have been back. She started out yesterday to catch a certain train, and she didn't come by it. We've had no word from her since." "You leave the matter to the bloodhounds of the law, Master Kay, and depend upon it, information will be received." Kay was cheered by his confident manner, and by his repeating, "The simple explanation is always the last thing thought of." When he reached Seekings, Ellen said, "Oh, Master Kay, your guardian's brother has rung up. There was so much fog and such a crowd at the station yesterday that she didn't start, but went back to her brother. She may be back tomorrow." "Well, that's a jolly good thing," Kay said, much cheered by the news, and he glanced out of the window to King Arthur's camp. And he saw in the fields below the camp the gleam of water. He ran down at once to the others. "I say," he said, "it's splendid. The floods are out. We'll go for a mudlark. We'll get out all our ships and sail them on the floods." Both Peter and he had received ships from the bishop's Christmas tree. "We'll provision them with almonds, raisins and chocolate," said Kay, "and we'll all take along sticks so as to poke them off if they get stuck anywhere. And we'll take sandwiches, cakes and hard-boiled eggs, and we won't come back till tea time." "I've got some lovely little things that would do for the ships," said Susan. "In the stocking they gave me from the tree there were these little tiny wooden barrels filled with hundreds and thousands. They were just the sort of barrels to go in the ships." She fetched the barrels, and they divided them up among the ships and put raisins and currants and bits of biscuit in each barrel. "I vote," Jemima said, "that the other barrel should be filled with ham, which we will pretend is salt pork." "They don't take salt pork any more," Peter said. "They take pemmican, which is beef chopped up with fat and raisins and chocolate and beer and almonds and ginger and stuff. It must be a sickening mess, but it's very nourishing. It's supposed to be what the ancient Britons had. They could take a piece as big as a big as a currant and live on it for a week." "You'd better have some anchors," Jemima said. "All ships have anchors, otherwise they wouldn't be able to stop." "You've got to be jolly careful with anchors with ships as little as these," Kay said. "Very often, if you try anchoring little ships like these, the anchor will pull them right underneath the water." They went out to the woodshed to get long sticks for poking off the ships if they got stuck, and then away they went in bright sunny weather, with the noise of running water everywhere. When they came to the meadows, there were pools in all the hollows, and many of the molehills were bubbling up water like running springs. Kay had the box of delights in his inner pocket, and sometimes he poked his hand inside to be sure that it was still there. Presently all was ready, and away the ships went downstream, with the children following, shouting and cheering and poking them clear of the banks with their sticks. When they had gone about half a mile down the stream, Susan, who was looking up at the sky, said, "There's an aeroplane." "No, two." The others didn't see the aeroplanes at first, but then saw them like two bright specks against a dark cloud. "It's odd we didn't hear them," Susan said. They went on with their ships, paddling in the water, getting very wet and enjoying themselves so much that they forgot about all other things, till Kay suddenly saw a shadow running across the field in front of him, and looked up, saw two aeroplanes circling silently overhead. "I say, look at the aeroplanes," he said. "Absolutely silent." Kay didn't say so, but the thought flashed through his mind that the aeroplanes were there after them. But the other thought that also flashed was that no aeroplane would dare to land on ground so rotten with springs as that low-lying field. "They're going to land," Susan said. "They're coming down by the copse there." "Bring the ships to the bank," Kay said. There were some old willow trees where he was standing. Climbing up one of them, he saw 4 men getting out of the aeroplanes. "They've got pistols and ropes," he said, "and they're coming towards us. I think it would be wise to get out of the way." "Do you think they're after us?" Susan said. "Who'd be coming after us with pistols and ropes?" Jemima said. "They're probably mole catchers coming to set traps." "When did you ever hear of mole catchers coming in aeroplanes with pistols?" said Peter. "What shall we do? Shall we run up to the mill or the farm?" "They'd beat us to either of those," Kay said. "Then what can we do?" Susan asked. "Well, I've got here," Kay said, "a sort of magic dodge. If we all hold hands while I touch a button on it, we shall shrink into little tiny creatures, and then we'll pop on board our ships and go down the stream." They held hands. He twiddled the little button, and instantly each one of them felt brighter and lighter than ever before. The earth seemed to shoot up and become enormous. There they were, clambering on board their gigantic ships. They cast loose the strings which tied them to the bank, and away they sailed downstream. Just as the ships went round the bend, the 4 men came in sight, close to the bank. It was plain that each man had 2 long pistols stuck in his belt, and they were coiling lassos ready for a throw. The ship went gaily down the mill stream into the mill race, and the mill race came a roaring and terrible torrent, down which the ships plunged so swiftly that they were through it before they had time to be afraid. In an instant they were in quiet water, out of all of the currents, with the ship's sides gently rubbing against the roots of an elm tree, which grew in the high bank. Peter and Kay hooked the anchors onto some of the roots of the trees, and they secured the ships alongside each other. That's the end of chapter 6.